Mr Deputy Speaker. I want to raise with the Assistant Minister the gap between the government's rhetoric and the reality. When it comes to city deals, there have been 3 proposed by the government. 2 of those, in terms of Townsville and Launceston, were simply matching previous commitments that had been made by the Labor opposition, dressing them up with the same amount of funding many months afterwards, dressing them up as somehow city deals. When it comes to Western Sydney, Blacktown isn't even included in Western Sydney.
The biggest council
and there's
in the
been
region.
no substance, no advance of any real plans there, at the same time as no funding in this budget again for rail through Badgerys Creek Airport to the north and to the south, from Campbelltown up to the northwest, connecting with that western line. Because indeed, Badgerys Creek Airport will open up employment opportunities.
The member for the member for Grainler is entitled to be heard in silence. The Assistant Minister and the member for Chifley will remain silent. I'm sorry.
Fine,
member for Grainler.
The Minister, thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, but the Minister shows his vulnerability by his actions. And I want to also raise the issue of infrastructure financing and the government's establishment of the Infrastructure Financing Unit, or the IFU, as we like to call it. And the fact is that the government, in establishing this is a solution looking for a problem, because as Infrastructure Partnerships Australia have said very clearly, we cannot identify any currently proposed infrastructure projects which are commercially viable and not already attracting finance. Therefore, we cannot see how the IFU will increase the pace of project delivery. Now, that's what the peak industry organisation have to say. The peak industry organisation. What's worse is it's been established with funding cut from the actual infrastructure budget. So money that was put aside to build roads and build railway lines is now being used to create another bureaucracy in the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. And Infrastructure Australia, of course, is already mandated to perform the task of financing of infrastructure. And I asked the Assistant Minister, is he aware that Section 5C, Part 2 of the Infrastructure Australia Act 2008 reads as follows: Infrastructure Australia has the function of providing advice to the Minister, Commonwealth, State, Territory and local governments, investors in infrastructure and owners of infrastructure on matters relating to infrastructure, including in relation to the following: F, mechanisms for financing investment in infrastructure. And indeed, that's what they've done. The Gold Coast Light Rail line was a $365 million injection from the Commonwealth that led to over a $1.2 billion project being constructed, a PPP organised with Infrastructure Australia's support, with the support from the Commonwealth. Similarly, innovative financing arrangements were in place already with an agreement between the Commonwealth and the Queensland Government for the Cross River Rail project. They were in place and a board actually appointed for the Melbourne Metro project, again using innovative financing, but not pretending that something can be done for nothing. The fact is that this government, when you look at federal infrastructure funding, it goes in 2017-18 of $8 billion, the next year down to 6.2, the next year down to 5.1, and the next year down to 4.2 in 2020-21. So what's actually happening is the government is refusing to invest in infrastructure. What's actually happening is that the government isn't engaged in cities. And they're on to the Assistant Minister, who gives the same speech at every forum, and he'll give the same one again in a couple of weeks at the Australian Financial Review Conference, where there's nothing actually of substance to back up the engagement. They abolished the Major Cities Unit. They've not engaged in important projects like Cross River Rail, Melbourne Metro, Western Sydney Rail, along that north-south corridor that's required to open up access to those jobs. And I say to the minister, why has he sidelined Infrastructure Australia by establishing the Infrastructure Financing Unit to do the job that Infrastructure Australia, under its legislation, is tasked to do?
The